My fiancée just confessed she's already engaged to another man, all while still wearing the $7,000 ring I bought her. If you were in my shoes at 32, how would you handle hearing that? I'd like to know in the comments. I'm Caleb, 32. The evening heat clung to Cleveland like a heavy coat when I dragged myself through the front door of our duplex in Tremont. 12 hours of pulling wire and checking circuits had left me sore and exhausted. I set my tool bag down, ready for nothing more than a hot shower and a plate of leftovers. But the moment I stepped into the kitchen, I knew something was off. Tara was sitting at the table. No TV humming in the background, no music from her phone. Just silence except for the faint ticking of the old clock on the wall. The overhead light caught the sparkle of the engagement ring I'd spent 5 months of overtime to pay for. It glinted as if mocking me, and I hadn't even heard her speak yet. "We need to talk," she said, voice flat but trembling at the edges, the words every man dreads. I pulled out the chair across from her, my hands still calloused from the job site, my work shirt smelling of copper dust and sweat. "Go ahead," I told her, steady though my chest already felt like it was bracing for impact. She bit her lip. Her eyes flicked to the side, anywhere but at me. Then she said it, slowly, as if the weight of each word might break the table between us. "Logan," he proposed, and I said yes. The room tilted. My ears rang. For a second, I wasn't sure if I'd heard her right. But then my eyes landed again on the ring, still snug on her finger, still shining under the kitchen light. The one I had sweated through weekends and double shifts to afford. I forced my voice out. "What did you just say?" Her lips quivered, but she pressed on. "It wasn't supposed to happen this way. He and I, we have history. He was my first love. Seeing him again, it felt like fate. Like something I couldn't ignore." I laughed once, bitter sharp. "Fate. While you've been wearing the ring I bought, living in the house I pay for." Tears welled up in her eyes, but I didn't feel sympathy. Not anymore. I pushed back from the table, my chair scraping against the floor. "Take it off," I said. She froze. "Caleb, take it off." Her hands shook as she twisted the ring. It slid free and she placed it on the table with a soft, metallic click. I picked it up, the cool weight pressing into my palm, and felt something inside me snap into clarity. "You need to leave tonight," I said quietly but firmly. "This is my home too." "No, it's not. Your name isn't on the lease. You're here because I wanted you here. That ends now." She sobbed, shoulders shaking, but I was past the point of negotiation. Months of sacrifice had been exchanged for betrayal. Her tears couldn't rewrite that. I grabbed my keys, walked out, and let the summer air hit my face. The street outside was calm, the orange glow of streetlights stretching over brick houses and cracked sidewalks. I climbed into my pickup truck, the ring still clutched tight in my fist. As the engine roared to life, the only sound louder in my head was her voice repeating that she had said yes to another man. And I knew with the certainty of a man tightening the last bolt on a live wire that my life had just been split in two. One part had ended in that kitchen. The other was about to begin. The first months after our engagement should have been golden. That's what people always say, right? You propose, she says yes, and for a little while the world feels brighter. Friends pat you on the back. Her co-workers gush over the ring, family asks about dates and venues. It's supposed to be the sweet spot, the calm before the storm of planning. But in my case, the calm never really showed up. I remember standing outside in the bitter February wind, wrapped in my heavy union jacket, waiting for the job foreman to bark out assignments. Cleveland winters don't forgive anyone. My breath came in white bursts, my fingers stiff inside gloves, as I gripped my thermos of lukewarm coffee. Work was steady, almost too steady. The company had us chasing deadlines on an industrial site near the flats, which meant endless overtime. When the foreman announced double shifts were open, my hand shot up without thinking. Every hour meant a little more cash, a little closer to covering wedding expenses. 5 months of overtime had already bought Tara's ring $7,000 that I wore in the form of calluses and sore joints. Now overtime was supposed to pay for the future, a down payment on a venue, maybe the honeymoon she'd been hinting about. At first, Tara seemed grateful. She'd squeeze my arm and say, "You're working so hard for us, Caleb." She even snapped a picture of the ring under the light at a downtown cafe and posted it with the caption, "My forever." Friends liked it, left hearts, congratulated us. For a brief week, I let myself believe the grind was worth it. But cracks have a way of showing early if you look close enough. Late nights and excuses. By March, when the snow finally melted into dirty gray piles along the sidewalks, Tara started coming home later. She'd text meeting ran long or catching up with a friend over coffee. It didn't sound suspicious on its own. She was a physical therapist at a sports medicine clinic downtown. Her schedule was always unpredictable, with athletes rehabbing after injuries. Still, the frequency nagged at me. I'd get home from a 12-hour shift to find the duplex dark, the fridge nearly empty, and no note except a text that she might not be back until late. At first, I shrugged it off. She deserved a life outside of me and her job. But then there was the perfume. I'm not the kind of man who notices brands or styles, but I know the scent Tara usually wore, light floral, something she'd picked up at the mall last Christmas. One night in April, when she came through the door, close to midnight, she hugged me absent-mindedly, and the smell was different. Stronger, muskier. It wasn't hers. "New perfume?" I asked casually. She blinked, then smiled too quickly. "Oh yeah. A sample from a coworker." I wanted to believe it. God help me, I did. Around the same time, I noticed her family acting different. Tara's mom had always been polite, supportive even, but suddenly her tone shifted. When we visited for Sunday dinner, I caught her giving me sidelong glances, whispering with Tara in the kitchen. Her younger sister once joked, though not really joking, "Don't screw this up, Caleb." Logan's always been the one for her. The name stung, though I tried not to show it. Logan, her high school sweetheart. A ghost from her past, who as far as I knew had stayed buried. Later that week, while Tara was in the shower, her phone buzzed on the counter. I didn't snoop, that's not who I am, but the screen lit up with a preview of a group chat. It was her family's thread. The message read, "At least she's finally thinking straight." My stomach dropped. I didn't need to see more. The implication was loud enough. Life in Tremont went on with its usual rhythm: brick row houses, coffee shops tucked on corners, sidewalks filled with joggers in the morning. But inside our duplex, I started to feel like a guest instead of a partner. Tara's laughter on the phone in the bedroom would stop abruptly when I walked in. Her excuses piled up: a friend in town, a coworker going through a tough time, an old classmate catching up. I kept myself busy with work. Double shifts blurred into triple. I'd leave before sunrise and return long after sunset, the city lights glowing across the river. My hands grew rougher, my back tighter, but I told myself it was all for us. For her. For the life we were supposed to be building together. Sometimes I'd stand in the duplex kitchen staring at the ring on her finger as she scrolled her phone. I'd wonder if she looked at it and thought of me, or if her mind was already somewhere else with someone else. One night in May, exhaustion finally broke through my patience. I came home, dropped my boots by the door, and found the living room dark. Again. Her car wasn't in the driveway. When she walked in past 10, smiling faintly, I asked, "Where were you this time?" "Just coffee with a friend," she answered. "Which friend?" She hesitated. "An old classmate." "You don't know him." The word "him" landed heavy. I clenched my jaw but said nothing. Instead, I went into the garage and stared at my tools. Wrenches, screwdrivers, coils of copper wire. All bought with hours of labor, all tangible proof of the sacrifices I was making. Yet the one thing I couldn't secure, no matter how many hours I worked, was her commitment. Looking back, the signs were everywhere. The late nights, the family whispers, the perfume that wasn't hers. But love, or maybe pride, blinded me. I kept telling myself it was stress timing, bad communication. In early June, she asked if we could pause planning the wedding. "It feels too soon," she said. "Let's not rush." I agreed, though. My heart sank. Who was I to argue? She smiled with relief, but it wasn't the kind of smile a fiancé should give when postponing the happiest day of her life. By then, the foundation was already cracked. I just didn't know how deep the fracture ran. As spring turned to summer, I worked longer hours than ever, believing I was building a future. In reality, I was digging myself deeper into a hole of trust and denial. The house still stood our names, still paired in conversations, but beneath the surface, the walls were splitting. And when they finally collapsed, it would be swift and merciless. I sat in my truck for almost an hour after leaving the duplex that night, staring at the ring in my palm. It felt heavier now, as if the weight of every overtime hour was pressing down through that small circle of metal. My phone buzzed twice in the cup holder. Her name lit up the screen, then disappeared. I didn't answer. By the time I finally drove off, it was close to midnight. I didn't know where else to go, so I pointed the truck toward Ohio City, where my sister Maya lived in a small second-floor apartment above a bakery. The smell of bread and sugar always drifted up into her place, warm and comforting, and right then I needed comfort more than anything. When she opened the door, her eyes widened. "Caleb, what happened?" I must have looked worse than I realized, sweat still clinging from work dirt on my jeans, my face pale under the porch light. I didn't say a word. I just held up the ring. She let me in without another question. I sat heavily on her couch, shoulders slumped, while she fetched 2 glasses of water. When she handed me mine, I finally managed to explain the words, tasting bitter even as I forced them out. "She said yes to him," I muttered. "Who?" "Logan." Her mouth dropped open. "You've got to be kidding me." I wish I was. I rubbed my forehead with a hand that wouldn't stop shaking. "She told me while wearing the damn ring." Maya's voice rose sharp. "After everything you've done, after all those shifts." "Yeah." I let out a humorless laugh. Apparently history with him meant more than the future with me. She swore under her breath, pacing the living room. "You don't deserve this." "None of it." I didn't respond. My chest felt hollow, like someone had carved out the middle and left me standing. For the first time in years, I had no plan. The next morning, my phone was full of messages. Not from Tara, but from her family. Her mother's text read, "You need to respect her choice." Her sister wrote, "Logan has always been the right one. Everyone knows it." And her father, the man who'd once shaken my hand and welcomed me at Sunday dinners, sent. She followed her heart. "Don't make this harder than it needs to be." Maya read them over my shoulder and scoffed. "Unbelievable. They're acting like you're the villain here. Let them," I said quietly, setting the phone face down on the table. "I'm not giving them any more of me." But the texts didn't stop. Over the next week, the phone kept buzzing with numbers I didn't recognize, each one a variation of the same story, that I was selfish, that I should let Tara be happy, that I was standing in the way of destiny. I didn't reply. Not once. Instead, I started taking screenshots and sending them to Maya, a record of how quickly loyalty could shift when blood was involved. She'd shake her head and say, "Keep them. You might need them someday." Nights were the hardest. In the duplex, silence had always been a comfort. With Tara gone, that silence grew sharp-cutting. I'd sit alone at the kitchen table, staring at the empty chair across from me, remembering her laughter, her voice filling the space. Every sound of the old house, the creak of pipes, the groan of wood felt louder now, like the building itself was mourning. More than once, I drove aimlessly around Cleveland, the city lights reflecting off the Cuyahoga River, just to avoid going home. I'd pass familiar spots, the diner where we'd eaten late-night pancakes, the small park bench where I'd first told her I loved her, each one twisting the knife deeper. Maya kept me grounded. She'd call late at night just to check in. Sometimes she'd invite me over for dinner, insisting I needed a hot meal. Over plates of pasta or takeout pizza, she'd remind me, "You're better off without her." One day you'll see this as freedom, not loss. I wanted to believe her. But at that point, freedom felt like another word for loneliness. One evening, after another 12-hour shift, I walked into my duplex to find a cardboard box sitting inside the door. On top was a note in her handwriting. "These are the last of my things. Don't contact me." Inside the box were random scraps, a sweater, some books, a mug I'd given her as a joke gift. All meaningless, yet each one a reminder. At the bottom, I found a photo of us from last Christmas, smiling under the tree in matching pajamas. I stared at it until my vision blurred, then shoved the entire box into the trash. I kept only the ring, not because I wanted her back. No, that bridge had burned beyond recognition. I kept it because it was proof. Proof of the nights I worked until my hands bled, proof of the sacrifices I made, proof of how far I'd been willing to go. Sometimes I'd open the drawer where I stored it and hold it in my palm. The metal felt cold, but steady. Unlike everything else, it hadn't lied. Summer rolled on hot and heavy. Work became my escape. I volunteered for every overtime shift, losing myself in the hum of machinery and the crackle of circuits. Each hour kept me from thinking too long, kept me from remembering the sound of her voice saying yes to another man. But grief has a way of seeping in, no matter how tightly you seal the cracks. I'd wake up in the middle of the night, heart pounding, the echo of her confession still rattling in my head. Sleep would not return, so I'd sit at the kitchen table with a glass of water staring out the window as dawn crept over the rooftops. Through it all, Maya never wavered. When I showed her the latest barrage of texts from Tara's family, she grabbed my phone, blocked the numbers herself, and shoved it back into my hand. "You don't need this poison," she said, and she was right. The day I finally pressed block on Tara's number, a strange calm settled over me. The silence that followed wasn't sharp anymore. It was clean, like a wound that had finally been bandaged. I still had the ring. I still had the memories. But I also had something else, a growing conviction that this betrayal, as brutal as it was, wouldn't be the end of me. It would be the beginning of something else. What exactly, I didn't know yet. But as I stood in my empty duplex holding the ring one last time before tucking it back into its drawer, I realized I wasn't powerless. I had a choice, and I was done letting her or anyone else make those choices for me. Fall settled over Cleveland with its usual stubborn chill. The air smelled of leaves and rain, and every evening the streets in Tremont filled with the sound of neighbors raking and kids shuffling through piles of orange and brown. Inside my duplex, things were quieter than ever. No clutter, no second toothbrush by the sink, no laughter echoing from the living room. Just me and the faint hum of the fridge. I had kept the ring tucked away in a drawer for weeks, convincing myself I'd decide what to do with it later. One Saturday morning, after another sleepless night, I drove downtown and walked into a jeweler's shop. The man behind the counter studied the diamond with a practiced eye, his fingers tapping numbers into a calculator. "Best I can do is 5,000, he said. I hesitated for only a second before sliding it across the glass. Watching him drop it into a small envelope felt like letting go of the last illusion I had been holding on to. The money wasn't equal to what I'd poured into it, but it was enough to give me something I hadn't had in months' options. The next day, I headed straight to a supply store and bought tools I'd only ever borrowed, before a heavy-duty multimeter, a conduit bender, a full set of insulated wrenches. I loaded them into the back of my truck, the smell of new metal filling the cab. Holding those tools, I felt more grounded than I had in months. The ring had been for someone else. These tools were for me. Work consumed me, but in a different way now. Overtime still filled my schedule, but each shift felt purposeful. I wasn't working toward a wedding that would never happen. I was working for stability, for independence, for a life I could rely on. When the foreman called for volunteers to stay late, my hand went up without hesitation. Maya noticed the change. One night over dinner in her apartment above the bakery, she said, "You look more like yourself again." Tired, but steady. "Work helps," I admitted. "Keeps my mind from going places it shouldn't." She nodded. "Maybe you need more than just work, though. Something outside of it." That's how I found myself at a Habitat for Humanity site in Parma a week later. At first I thought it would just be another construction job, only unpaid. But as I stood beside strangers wiring a home for a family who had never had one of their own, something shifted. Watching their kids peek around corners, eyes wide at the sight of walls rising where there had only been dirt, I felt a sense of purpose that no paycheck could match. On Saturdays, I traded my union hard hat for a volunteer one. The rhythm of hammering, the laughter of crews sharing sandwiches during breaks, the simple satisfaction of seeing lights flicker on in a finished room, it all stitched together something inside me that had been torn. There were still nights I lay awake, the echo of Tara's confession whispering through my mind. I still drove past places we had shared, the memories stinging like fresh cuts. But each time I tightened a wire, each time I saw a family smile at a finished project, the weight of those memories dulled a little more. I wasn't naive. The scars weren't going away overnight. But for the first time in months, I wasn't just surviving. I was rebuilding. On a cool October evening, after a long day on both the job site and the Habitat house, I stood in my garage staring at the rows of new tools hanging neatly on the wall. The air smelled faintly of oil and sawdust. For a moment, I imagined the ring sitting where those tools were now, a useless reminder of promises broken. Instead, what I had was tangible, solid mine. I realized then that I had taken the first real step forward. The ring was gone. The illusions were gone. But I was still here, stronger than before and ready for whatever came next. Winter came early to Cleveland that year. The wind off Lake Erie cut through even the thickest jackets, and the sidewalks in Tremont turned slick with ice before Thanksgiving leftovers were gone. I spent most nights in my duplex, the heat turned up just enough to keep the pipes from freezing, the new tools neatly lined in the garage like soldiers waiting for duty. I thought I was finally finding a rhythm. Work during the week. Habitat projects on weekends, dinners with Maya whenever our schedules aligned. It wasn't perfect, but it was steady. After the chaos of summer, steady felt like a blessing. Then the texts started again. At first I didn't recognize the number. The message read, "I just want to talk." I deleted it. 2 days later, another came in, "Please, Caleb, just hear me out." My gut told me it was her, and I wasn't wrong. By the third message, she used my name. Tara had found a way back into my phone, if not my life. I stared at the screen, thumb hovering, then set the phone face down on the table. I refused to take the bait. That night, I forwarded the screenshots to Maya. She called within minutes. "You didn't respond right. Not a word. Good. Don't give her even an inch. She'll take a mile." She was right. And yet, even as I ignored the texts, my chest tightened every time the phone buzzed. Part of me wanted answers, closure, some explanation that would make sense of it all. But deep down, I knew there was no explanation that could undo what she'd done. As December settled in, the messages grew bolder. "I know you're still hurting. We can figure this out. It doesn't have to be over." I blocked the number. The next day, a new one appeared. It was like playing whack-a-mole with ghosts. No matter how many numbers I shut out, she found another. Some messages were long, pleading paragraphs. Others were just a single word, "Please." I started sleeping with the phone in another room. Maya became my anchor. When I showed her the endless stream of texts one Saturday night over Chinese takeout in her apartment, she shook her head in disbelief. "She doesn't want you back, Caleb. She wants control. There's a difference." Her words stuck with me. I realized Tara wasn't reaching out of love or regret. She was reaching out because I had finally slipped beyond her grasp. And for someone who craved control, that was unbearable. The new year approached, and with it came a quiet resolution of my own. I couldn't stop her from sending messages. I couldn't stop her family from whispering or blaming me in their private circles. But I could control my own response. Silence. That was my boundary. So I blocked every new number. I scrubbed her name from my contacts, unfollowed every connection on social media, cut the digital thread that had once tied us together. It was harder than I expected. There were nights I sat staring at the block option, my thumb trembling, wondering if severing the last link meant admitting I was truly alone. But each time I reminded myself of Maya's words, control versus love. And I pressed the button. The silence that followed was different this time. Not sharp, not suffocating. It was clean. One night in late January, I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of coffee watching snowflakes swirl under the streetlight outside. My phone sat silent beside me. For the first time in months, I realized I wasn't waiting for it to buzz. I picked up my mug, took a long sip, and whispered to the empty room. "No more." And I meant it. By early 2024, the worst of the storm had passed. Cleveland was still buried under snow, but the ice inside me had started to thaw. My days fell into a rhythm that felt almost peaceful. I'd wake before sunrise, pack a thermos of coffee, load my truck with the new tools I'd bought, and head to whichever industrial site needed power that week. Evenings I split between simple dinners at home and occasional nights at Maya's place, where the smell of bread from the bakery downstairs always seemed to soften my edges. Work had become more than survival. It was becoming something I could take pride in again. Those tools I'd bought with the money from Tara's ring felt like an extension of my hands. The multimeter I used daily, the conduit bender that saved hours of labor, the insulated wrenches that made every job safer, each one reminded me that I had chosen to invest in myself, not in someone who had walked away. One morning at the union hall, our foreman clapped me on the back after I finished rewiring a stubborn panel. "You've got steady hands, Caleb. Not many guys can work live like that without losing their cool." The compliment stuck with me all day. It wasn't the first time either. Co-workers had begun turning to me with questions, asking how I would approach tricky circuits or difficult layouts. For years, I had just kept my head down and worked. Now, for the first time, I felt like I was earning not just a paycheck, but respect. Habitat for Humanity gave me a different kind of satisfaction. On Saturdays, I'd drive out to Parma, join a mix of retirees, college kids, and fellow tradesmen, and spend the day building. There was something humbling about standing shoulder to shoulder with strangers, hammering nails, running wire, seeing a bare frame transform into a home. I remember one family in particular, a young couple with 2 small kids. They showed up on site every weekend, helping wherever they could. The father asked me one afternoon how the wiring worked, his hands smudged with sawdust as he tried to follow my explanation. By the end of the day, I let him flip the breaker himself. When the lights flickered on for the first time, his daughter squealed and clapped her hands, her whole face glowing. That sound stayed with me longer than any paycheck ever had. In those moments, I realized how much I'd been missing by tying my entire sense of worth to a relationship. Love can make you blind, but work that builds something real, whether it's a house or a reputation, clears your vision. Maya noticed the change too. Over spaghetti one evening in February, she smiled and said, "You look lighter these days, like the weight's not crushing you anymore." "Maybe because I finally stopped carrying it," I said, twirling pasta around my fork. She raised her glass of water, to carrying only what matters. I clinked my glass against hers and meant it. The small victories stacked up, finishing a complicated job without a mistake, teaching a younger apprentice how to test a circuit, safely watching another Habitat house near completion. Each one was a brick in a wall I was rebuilding inside myself, sturdy and mine alone. Of course, ghosts still tried to creep in. Every so often I'd catch myself glancing at my phone, half expecting another number to break through the blocks. But more often than not, there was nothing. The silence, once suffocating, now felt like fresh air. One Saturday in March, I stood outside a nearly finished Habitat house, wiping sweat from my brow, and realized I was smiling. The sun was bright, the snow finally melting, and laughter carried across the lot as volunteers shared sandwiches on the tailgate of a pickup. For the first time in a long time, I wasn't thinking about Tara or Logan or betrayal. I was just present. And presence, I discovered, was its own kind of victory. Spring came to Cleveland with a burst of color. Trees along the streets of Tremont filled with blossoms, and for the first time in months, people spilled onto patios, shaking off the winter. I felt lighter, too. My routine steady, my weekends filled with Habitat projects, my weekdays at job sites, where apprentices now came to me for guidance. Then one evening in April, I made the mistake of checking Facebook. I wasn't searching for her. I wasn't even thinking about her. But a mutual friend had tagged someone, and the picture appeared before I could scroll past. Tara and Logan dressed in coordinated outfits, standing in a sunlit field, her hand with a new ring stretched forward. The caption read, "She said yes." The irony nearly made me laugh out loud. She had already said yes once before to me. I clicked away quickly, but the image burned itself into my brain. Not out of longing, out of disbelief at how easily she could rewrite history. The next morning, my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I nearly ignored it, but curiosity got the better of me. The message read, "Caleb, I need your help. It's important." I stared at it, then shook my head. I knew exactly who it was. Hours later, another came through. "Logan's business is tight right now, and we need to put a deposit down on a venue. $6,000 would secure it." Could you help just this once? I laughed bitterly, sitting on the edge of my bed. The nerve of her. After everything, after shattering my trust and choosing him, she was asking me to fund their wedding. I didn't reply. That evening, I showed Maya the texts over dinner at her place. She nearly choked on her food. What, Caleb, tell me you didn't answer. Of course I didn't. She actually thinks you'd give her money for her wedding to the guy she left you for. Her outrage was almost comical, but I felt strangely calm. A year ago, this would have broken me. Now it just confirmed what I already knew: she hadn't changed. The next message came 2 days later. It's not just about the money. Could you sign the contract for the lighting rental with your union discount? We'd save a lot. Think of it as helping me start this new chapter. We can keep it between us. That one didn't even sting. It was so brazen, it was absurd. I took a screenshot and sent it to Maya. She called instantly, her voice sharp. She's insane. Does she think you're her bank and her broker all rolled into one? I think she knows I'm not. She's just testing if I've still got strings she can pull. Maya sighed heavily. Promise me you'll block her. For good this time. I nodded, though she couldn't see it. Yeah. It's time. Still, before blocking, I sat in silence for a while, staring at the words on the screen. The irony was suffocating. She'd once called me her forever. Now she was calling me her backup plan, her safety net. And I refused to play that role, so I blocked the number. Then I blocked the next one she tried. And the next. Each block was like cutting one more rope that had been holding me down. By the end of that week, my phone was quiet again. Not the painful silence of months past, but a steady, peaceful silence. Maya came by that weekend with a case of beer. We sat on my porch, the evening warm for April, the neighborhood buzzing with the sound of kids on bikes and dogs barking. She raised her bottle toward me. To letting go, she said. I clinked mine against hers. To letting go. I leaned back in my chair, the blocked numbers already fading into the past. For the first time, I didn't feel the urge to respond, to explain, to fight, because the truth was simple. I didn't owe her anything. Not money, not discounts, not even my attention. And denying her those things quietly, calmly, without drama, that was its own kind of victory. By the time summer rolled around again, a full year since that night in the duplex, my life looked nothing like the wreckage Tara had left me in. The scars were still there, sure, but they didn't ache anymore. They had toughened like the calluses on my hands, proof that I had worked through the pain and come out stronger. Work was steady. The union trusted me with more complex assignments, and apprentices now shadowed me, eager to learn. One of them, a kid barely out of trade school, once told me, "You make this look easy." I just smiled. It wasn't easy, nothing about the last year had been, but it was simple. Show up, do the job, don't quit. At the Habitat site in Parma, I had become a familiar face. Families remembered me, volunteers greeted me by name. On one house, a boy no older than 10 handed me a hand-drawn thank you card after I helped his dad wire their new living room. I kept it tucked in my glove box, more valuable than any paycheck. Meanwhile, whispers about Tara and Logan drifted through mutual acquaintances. I never asked, but people talked anyway. Logan's contracting jobs had dried up, and Tara had quit her clinic after personal issues. Rumors said they'd downsized, that the wedding had been modest, that money was tighter than they let on in those staged engagement photos. I didn't celebrate their hardship. That wasn't who I was. But I won't lie, there was a grim satisfaction in knowing I hadn't lifted a finger to bail them out, and yet I was thriving while they were struggling. My justice wasn't loud. It didn't come with court dates or confrontations. It came in the form of silence, of boundaries held, of a life rebuilt on my own terms. One evening in September, Maya and I sat on my porch watching the sunset paint the sky in streaks of gold and red. She sipped her beer and looked over at me. You know, you could have gone down a dark road after what she did. But you didn't. You built something better. I thought about it, the weight of the last year settling in. She was right. I could have drowned in bitterness, could have wasted years chasing revenge or answers that never would have satisfied me. Instead, I had turned the page. I guess sometimes the best revenge, I said slowly, is no revenge at all. Just living in a way that proves you didn't need them. Maya raised her bottle. To no revenge, I clinked mine against hers, smiling. To no revenge. The cicadas hummed in the trees, the neighborhood quiet, except for their song. For once, I wasn't haunted by what had been or anxious about what would come. I was simply present at peace in the life I had rebuilt. Tara's choices no longer defined me. Logan's presence no longer threatened me. Their names were just echoes fading further with each passing day. The only name that mattered was mine. Caleb, 32, electrician, brother, builder. A man who had been broken and put himself back together piece by piece, and that was enough. Looking back, it's almost hard to believe how far I've come in a single year. I went from sitting in my truck, clutching a ring that had become worthless, to standing steady on my own 2 feet, surrounded by work I'm proud of and people who matter. The betrayal hurt. It cut deep, and for a while I thought it would swallow me whole. But it didn't. The pain became fuel. Every overtime shift, every Saturday spent wiring homes for families who needed them, every quiet evening when I chose peace over chaos. All of it built me into someone stronger than I was before. I never gave Tara money. I never signed her contracts. I never answered her desperate texts. And the silence that followed turned out to be the loudest answer of all. Quiet justice isn't about shouting or fighting. Sometimes it's about choosing yourself, drawing the line, and moving forward without looking back. So here I am, Caleb, 32, an electrician in Cleveland. Not perfect, not unscarred, but whole again. And if you've ever faced betrayal, maybe you know what I mean. When I say this, the sweetest victory isn't in revenge. It's in living well and proving to yourself that you were always enough. What about you? If you've ever walked away from someone who took you for granted, how did you find your own peace? Share it in the comments. I'd like to hear your story too.